All right, welcome to our explainer. Today, we're jumping back in time, way back like 3,500 years to ancient India. This was an era defined by sacred hymns, ritual fires, and, well, cows. But this isn't just some dusty history lesson. No, this is a story about a huge transformation, how a society of wandering herders became the architects of kingdoms. How their entire world, which was literally measured in cattle, laid the foundation for ideas that, still shape things today. So let's dive in. Okay, so this is the big question, right? The one that's going to guide us through this whole thing. How did a collection of ancient hymns, the Vedas, somehow become the cultural blueprint for society that went from loose-knit tribes to actual territorial kingdoms? How did a world where wealth was on four legs become a world where wealth was the land under your feet? That's the puzzle we're going to unpack. So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll set the scene with the age of the Vedas itself. Then, we'll dive into what that early tribal world really looked like. After that, we hit the big one, the Great Iron Shift, this huge technological revolution. We'll see how that led to new kingdoms and a whole new social order. And finally, we'll look at the echoes of this era that we can still hear today. Okay, let's set the stage. When we talk about the Vedic Age, what are we even talking about? When was it? And maybe more importantly, how in the world do we know anything about a time that's so incredibly distant? Well, the answer is kind of like detective work, piecing together clues from ancient texts, from what we dig out of the ground, and even from inscriptions found thousands of miles away. This timeline is really our anchor here. The whole Vedic Age lasts for almost 1,000 years, from about 1500 BC all the way down to 600 BC. But here's the thing, you can't just lump it all together. Historians have split it into two really distinct phases. The Early Vedic period from 1500 to 1000 BC, and then the Later Vedic period from 1000 down to 600 BC. And trust me, the world at the end of this timeline looks almost nothing like the world at the beginning. The change is just massive. So our picture of this age is really built on three key pillars of evidence. First, obviously, are the Vedic texts themselves, like the famous Rig Veda. But, and this is so cool, we don't just have to take their word for it. We have some amazing external proof, like the Bogoskoi inscription found in modern-day Turkey, which actually mentions Vedic gods like Indra. And then you have the archaeology, the physical stuff, like the very distinct painted grayware pottery that helps us literally map out where these people lived. All right, let's jump into our first act and see what this early world was actually like. We're stepping into the early Vedic period, a time that wasn't defined by borders or big cities. It was all about family, about clans, and about being on the move, always looking for fresh pastures for the most valuable thing in their world, their cattle. So let's paint a picture of what life was like back then. The whole economy was pastoral. It was all about the herds. Your wealth wasn't gold or land. It was how many cows you had. And because of that, life was semi-nomadic. You were always moving. This also meant society was, for the most part, pretty egalitarian. You didn't have some all-powerful king calling the shots. Instead, big decisions were debated in tribal assemblies, places called the Sabha and the Samiti, where key people in the tribe actually had a voice. And this next part, it just drives home how important cows were. The title for the chief of the tribe, the Rajan, wasn't king of the land or anything like that. It was Gopati, literally the protector of cows. His number one job was to protect the tribe's main asset. Even the word for war, Gevishti, pretty much just meant a search for more cows. That tells you everything you need to know about what mattered to them. Now, here's a detail that might actually surprise you. In this early phase, women had a remarkably high status. They could take part in those assemblies we mentioned, and they could pursue spiritual knowledge right alongside the men. The texts even name these brilliant female thinkers, like Gargi and Maitreyi, who were known for going toe-to-toe with male sages in the deepest philosophical debates. And you really want to hold on to that fact, because, spoiler alert, this just wasn't going to last. Okay, now we are at the turning point, the pivot for this entire story. Every so often in history, one piece of tech comes along and just flips the whole script. For the Vedic people, that game-changing innovation was a new, hard, dark metal. This was the Great Iron Shift. Right around 1200 to 1000 BC, people in this part of the world figured out how to work with iron. In the Vedic texts, they called it Krishna Ayas, basically the dark metal, to set it apart from copper or bronze, which they already knew. But this wasn't just some new material for making tools. It was about to kick off a complete overhaul of their entire society. This comparison right here says it all. Iron just changed the entire game. Think about it. Suddenly, with strong iron axes, you can actually clear those super dense forests of the Gangetic Plains. With an iron plow, you can cultivate tough soil you couldn't before. And what does that lead to? A massive surplus of food. And that surplus was the key. It meant you didn't have to be a nomad anymore. You could settle down. And the second you settle down, the most valuable thing isn't your mobile herd of cows, it's the fixed piece of land you're on. The very reason for fighting was about to change forever. So this Iron Revolution completely reshaped their world. And that brings us to the later Vedic period. The ripple effects from that one single technology created a brand new kind of society, one that was settled, one that was layered, and one that was a whole lot more complex. Okay, this slide right here, this is the heart of the whole transformation. The basic unit of society shifted from the jana, which means the tribe, the people, to the janapada. That word literally means the place where the tribe sets its foot. It's a fundamental shift from being about people to being about place. And the leader is no longer just a gopati, a protector of cows. Now he's a samrat, a sole ruler over a defined territory. And as the king's power shot up, those old tribal assemblies, the Sabha and Samiti, just faded into the background. Power was now in one place. So how did these new, powerful kings show off their authority? Well, through these huge, elaborate public rituals, like the Ashvamedha, or the horse sacrifice. Now, this was way more than just a religious ceremony. I mean, this was pure geopolitics just dressed up as a ritual. A special horse was set loose to wander for a whole year, and the king's army followed it. The king was basically daring any other ruler to stop his horse. If the horse passed through your territory and you didn't challenge it, you were basically accepting his dominance. The final sacrifice was this massive public display of his supreme, unquestioned control over all that land. So, once people settle down and start doing different jobs, what happens? You guessed it, society gets more, well, rigid. This is where we see the beginnings of the Varna system. It was a framework that organized everybody into 4 broad hierarchical categories. You had the Brahmanas, who were the priests and teachers. The Kshatriyas were the rulers and the warriors. The Vaishyas were the farmers, the merchants, the producers. And the Shudras performed labor and services for the other groups. Now, at first, this might have been about what you did, but pretty soon it became all about who you were born as, a huge change from that earlier, more fluid society. And all this new rigidity, well, it had a really harsh impact on women. Remember those brilliant female philosophers we talked about, like Gargi and Maitreyi? Well, in this later Vedic period, that world was gone. Women were now barred from attending political assemblies. As society became obsessed with owning land and passing it down from father to son, a woman's role got smaller and smaller, mostly confined to the household. It's a really stark shift. One text from this time, the Achareya Brahmana, even describes a daughter as a source of sorrow. It's just a tragic change in attitudes that would have lasting consequences. So yeah, their politics and their society were completely remade. But that's not the whole story, not by a long shot. At the very same time that all of this was happening, the rise of kings, the new social order, an incredible intellectual revolution was also taking place. And you could argue that this would become the most powerful and enduring legacy of the entire Vedic Age. What's really fascinating is you can actually see this change happening in their literature. It starts with the early Vedic hymns, prayers to the gods for rain, for cattle, for victory. Then you get the Brahmanas, which are basically these super detailed instruction manuals on how to perform the rituals correctly. But then the focus starts to shift. The Aranyakas, or the forest books, begin to explore the deeper, mystical meaning behind the rituals. And this all leads to the Upanishads. And boom, it's a complete game changer. The Upanishads are these amazing philosophical dialogues that turn the camera around, from looking outward to looking inward. They're asking these huge, deep questions like, what am I, really? What is the nature of reality? It's this massive shift away from doing external rituals to please the gods toward a new goal, gaining internal knowledge to understand the universe. And it's right from this tradition, from the Mundaka Upanishad, that we get the famous phrase that is now the national motto of modern India, Satyameva Jayate, truth alone triumphs. It just perfectly captures this new quest for ultimate internal truth. And that really brings us to our final thought. Think about the journey we've just taken, right? From wandering tribes fighting over cows to settled kingdoms building complex societies. From hymns asking for worldly goods to philosophical dialogues asking about the nature of the self. This whole transformation set the stage for what came next in India: the second urbanization, the rise of huge cities, and new ways of thinking like Buddhism and Jainism that would challenge that old Vedic order. So the real question for you to think about is this: how do the ideas and the structures born in this ancient age, from the social hierarchies to that profound search for truth, continue to echo in our world today? That right there is the lasting legacy of the great Vedic transformation.